This is Live Booleans.
Welcome to Live Booleans episode 5. My name's Costa. I'm joined by my co-host Alex.
How you doing, Costa?
Not too bad. Today we are joined by Modern Vintage Gamer. Modern Vintage Gamer is a game developer at Night Dive Studios. He used to be known as Lantis on the original Xbox scene, and he's also running his own YouTube channel, Modern Vintage Gamer, which talks all things retro and vintage. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, fellas. It's great to be here, and it's awesome to talk to a couple of Aussies again, mate. I'm telling you, it's been a minute since I have, so I really appreciate you guys having me on the show.
Fantastic. So, just for those out there who don't know who Modern Vintage Gamer is, we thought, how about you just go through, tell us about how you sort of got started. I know you're a big advocate and developer in the homebrew scene. How'd you get started into that, and then how'd that sort of lead you into the more traditional game development stuff?
Yeah, good question. I'll try to keep it brief. There's a lot to cover, but I'll kind of just touch over it. But when I graduated from college or university back in the early 90s, I did a computer science degree, and when I got out of college, I just kind of took regular IT jobs, working just, for just regular companies doing business software development and stuff like that. But as someone who grew up as a gamer, like I was a kid that loved, the Commodore 64, the Amiga, and then the Super Nintendo and all that stuff. I've always been into games, and when the original Xbox came out was pretty much when the homebrew stuff really started, because as someone who was like a gamer, and I liked PC games at the time, the original Xbox was something that was like a PC in the living room, and it felt really. I kind of was really drawn to it because it seemed like it took the best parts of a PC and it just made it a part of your entertainment center. Mm-hmm. So when I bought one, I quickly realized that there was like this scene that was, basically hacking the thing to pieces. And there were already people running homebrew on it. So I wanted to get involved in it. I didn't really know where to begin, but having a software development background, I kind of figured that I had half a chance of writing some homebrew and seeing if I could get it to work. So I bought an Xbox, I got it all modded up, and I started porting over some emulators over to the original Xbox. And I quickly realized that, I was pretty good at it, like it wasn't something that I was struggling with. Like I learned DirectX pretty quickly. I learned the APIs, and I learned the hardware very quickly. And that's pretty much how the homebrew stuff started. And from there, it kind of, once the original Xbox kind of died off, I moved over did some stuff on the GameCube for a while, and I did some PSP homebrew development, did Xbox 360. Recently, I've dabbled with the Switch as well with some homebrew stuff. So I've been kind of doing it for many, many years. And the way that it kind of transitioned into game development I just kind of got noticed, I think the one thing that stood out that really got me noticed was, I think about 2 years ago now, I ended up messing around with the Switch, and I did a port of Diablo to the Switch.
Yep.
And it actually got picked up by like Kotaku and some big kind of media publications. Yeah. And I was a little nervous because I wasn't sure if Nintendo was going to come after me and basically take it all down. Yeah. But the publicity was really good. I actually got I got Night Dive. They reached out to me and asked, would you be interested in helping out with some of our projects? And that's pretty much how it all started. I mean, it was, it was through the homebrew stuff that ultimately got me, a spot in the industry. So.
Wow. And what was the first bit of homebrew you wrote? Like, what you say was an emulator or?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was messing around with, some simple programs, just some 3D stuff just to get a feel for, because I didn't know DirectX, right? Yeah, so if you want to learn how to write software on the Xbox, you need to learn DirectX. I mean, it's part of the system. So, I did some basic stuff, right? Spinning cubes and texture mapped, 3D scenes. But the first thing I actually did and kind of released was a Super Nintendo emulator, awesome. which really got, it just kind of took off. Like I didn't realize how how many people wanted something like that, you know, because for me, like if I'm working on a project, this sounds a little selfish, but I'm doing it for myself, you know, because I want to play, you know, Super Mario World on my big television, right? Before, you know, anyone else. So I didn't realize how well accepted and how awesome, you know, people really liked the work, and it kind of snowballed from there, you know.
Mm-hmm. And like original Xbox, I mean, it's still being used as, you know, that well, maybe not so much in the past few years, but it was still used as the sort of the king of all emulators, and all the way up to 64 it could be emulated. So it's you know, pretty solid machine as well. So one of the things that I love seeing is like how you live stream porting Xbox games, you know, porting games to the Xbox.
That's right.
What was it, do you think, that made the original Xbox so popular for Homebrew? Was it the fact that it was just so similar to a PC? Or
I think so. Not just that. I mean, it was very similar to a PC. So if you had code running on x86, you could get it over to the Xbox without too much trouble. But it also had all the features that most consoles at the time didn't. So you had built-in networking, so you could do all sorts of cool stuff with TCP/IP. You had, you know, at the time you had a big hard drive, 8 gigabytes. I mean, we kind of laugh at that now, and you had enough memory to do kind of cool stuff, you know. So other systems like the PS2 and the GameCube, you know, you had memory cards, right? You know what I mean? You didn't really have any mass storage, not for a while. So the Xbox pretty much had it all in one package, and I think coupled with x86 made it very desirable for you know, for homebrew development. Yeah,
sort of like the step up from the Dreamcast it actually had Ethernet built right in, and it had a hard drive built right in as well.
Exactly.
How have you found sort of the reaction to you live streaming, you know, your programming efforts?
Mostly, well, I got to say, it's a little nerve wracking, you know. Like, I mean, think about it. Like, if you write code, even just day to day, it's pretty stressful as it is. So now you've got like, you know, 1,000 people watching you do it, and there's always, you know, someone in the chat like telling you, do it this way instead. You know what I mean? So it's a little nerve wracking, but I will tell you, I'll fill you in a little secret. I usually do a quick dry run before I live stream. So I'm not going in completely blind, right? Like I want some kind of payoff at the end of it. So I'll usually whip up a quick proof of concept and make sure that, you know, what I'm going to do is going to have some type of reward. And then I'll walk through the whole thing. Because I mean, but there are people that live stream live coding sessions on Twitch and stuff, and I mean, they sit there all day and do it, and I have nothing but respect for people like that. I couldn't do that, man. Honestly,
that's the thing. It's like you got all these people watching over you constantly. Have, you know, they're looking over your shoulder, just sort of judging you. With
exactly, it's like code reviews, you know, pretty much for the whole duration. So
hours,
and there's always someone in the chat that's like, "Oh, you should have done this instead." You know, well, why'd you flip this bit, or why'd you do that? And you know, you get confused and stuff. So, but it's fun. I like it. I mean, it's an interesting thing to do. I'll probably do more of them, but it's definitely not, you know, my bread and butter stuff, my normal stuff that I would normally do. You know?
Yeah, I've been loving all your videos lately on I saw the leak last week by Nintendo, and then you did it a couple months ago as well with some of the other leaks that were going on. What is it with all these leaks coming out, you know, lately, like from Nintendo source code to Xbox original BIOS stuff, everything?
Yeah, so the Nintendo stuff is interesting. It's from what I understand, and I talked about this in my video, but someone out there was able to hack into one of Nintendo's partners that had basically source code repository with a lot of, you know, Nintendo first party source code and assets and stuff like that. So Nintendo themselves weren't hacked directly, but because, you know, this third party was, they ended up, you know, with a lot of stuff. And what I've heard is, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like I keep hearing that they're sitting on like, and I don't know if this number is accurate, but like 5 terabytes worth of data. So there's like GameCube stuff, more Wii. There's Wii U stuff. All this stuff is still coming apparently. So that's pretty scary. I mean, if I was Nintendo, I'd be feeling a little nervous about that. Like the early stuff that they've leaked so far, you could say, it's not really hurting their brand very much. It's not really hurting them. But once you start leaking, Wii U, that's when things are different, because there's still probably a lot of patents and stuff right now that are still very much active. Yeah. So they may start, coming down on that. The Xbox leak, I don't really know where that came from. I'd heard about it earlier this year, and I did cover it because one of the things I like to do on the channel is there's all this kind of hype around leaks, like, we've got the source code for everything, we can compile everything on every platform. But when you kind of dig into some of this stuff, you quickly realize that it's not all the way it seems sometimes. Like the Nintendo, the recent ones, the N64 leaks, most of the source code was incomplete. And that wasn't really communicated very well in mainstream media sites and stuff like that. They just said the source code for Ocarina of Time is available. It's like, well, it's not, because half of it's missing. You can't compile it. But on the flip side, there were a lot of interesting discoveries that happened. And look, I don't know where these are coming from, but what I've heard is there's more to come. So
it's insane to see how that plays out. It's insane to think that some part, these partners out there are holding source code from so long ago, and it's such a it goes all the way from the early 90s to now. They've got all this stuff just sitting there. It's insane
true,
to think about.
Like you hear these stories about Square Enix, Final Fantasy VIII and Parasite Eve, those kind of 90s PlayStation games. They literally threw the source code out. They literally threw the tape drives out with the code on. And that you can't recover them. Yeah. But to Nintendo's credit, I mean, they kept everything. Literally from the first day, they've got everything backed up. So that's actually a really good thing for them.
When this all started, it reminded me of when Hendrix's posthumous albums were getting released, and the family was so annoyed. They're like, he was around for 3 years, he put out what he wanted, and for the last 40 years it's just been non-stop. So for a game developer, it's really exciting to see all these leaks, but it does have that moral, Nintendo knew what they wanted to release.
It's interesting. Part of me felt like I shouldn't cover it because I'm just kind of, in some ways it felt like I was just throwing, fuel to the fire almost. But on the flip side, I think, what I really wanted to convey was this is what actually is part of this, not what you're reading in, on websites, because the websites will just say source code to, Zelda has been leaked, which is not, it's not wrong, but it's not accurate either,
But there's whole scenes out there, there's whole websites out there which cover and recover old games, like betas that never got released or games that were unreleased. There's a whole scene out there. So I don't think, I don't feel like you did anything wrong by covering it. I mean, I think you're giving it justice because you're actually talking about what exactly was leaked, and not just for headlines and clickbait titles and that sort of stuff.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, and I guess it sort of leads into how, I saw a couple months ago, was it the Super Mario 64 got recompiled on was it on Windows and on every single platform basically? Was that to do with that leak or?
No. So Super Mario 64 was actually reverse engineered. So it's a project that's been going on for probably about 4 or 5 years now. So essentially someone took the ROM, and I'm being very, very simplistic, but basically reverse engineered the whole thing into portable C code. So that code it's all clean room, which means that there's no proprietary Nintendo libraries that are being linked to, or there's nothing that was that is traced back to Nintendo's libraries or APIs. So Nintendo they really don't have a legal standpoint to take that down. So, but the side effect of, well, not the side effect, but the good part about the recompilation project is that the code's so portable, you can pretty much bring it on any piece of hardware that has a 3D API. So it's arrived on the PC. I know someone did a port for the Switch illegally on Homebrew. I heard just the other day that someone ported it to the 3DS.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I mean, I want to see one for the Dreamcast. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hoping for that. If I had more time on my hands, I'd probably do it myself. But
I want to see you live streaming. I want to see you live streaming.
Oh man, that's one of those that's one of those live streams that would go bad quickly. I think.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting project, and there's other Nintendo 64 games that are currently being decompiled as well, reverse engineered. So there's more to come with that team. They're doing some amazing work.
Awesome. And out of these leaks that have come out over the past few months, has there been any developments from that? Like, has anyone sort of messed with it, or they're too scared to mess with it?
Apart from like putting Luigi in the game, which was something people were really excited about, nothing's particular stands out, but I think it's still very early days. Like right now, people are still kind of hyped that you can compile Super Mario 64 on other architectures and other hardware.
Yeah,
but I would expect to see some really cool stuff coming out of that project. I've heard there's been some 2-player split screen type things that have happened, but there's probably like no one's built like any new custom levels for the game or anything like that. And now you have the ability to do things like that,
Yeah, I'd like to see like a Super Mario Maker type thing where you can build your own levels and piece them together. That'd be amazing.
That'd be pretty good.
Yeah. And a lot of your videos are around security exploits in games and consoles. For devs that are sort of upcoming, what do you see are the biggest sort of risks that they face in terms of going and exploiting? I know that there was a lot of issues like a couple of years ago with Sony over the PS3 and all that sort of stuff, but what do you sort of see as the issues?
I think right now, security on systems is pretty well locked down. If you look at current generation, Switch aside, of course, which got hacked pretty much the first day, I would say that, stick to your first principles. If you're a developer and you're worried about your stuff getting leaked or your stuff getting hacked, there's really good crypto APIs these days that will really obfuscate lots of information away from prying eyes. So, but from a hardware perspective, Xbox One. I've heard some stories, but hasn't been hacked yet. Honestly, there's been a couple of exploits that have occurred, but the way that systems are these days, those types of things can be patched pretty much immediately without any significant downtime. And things are a lot different these days. Crypto is so secure that if it's done correctly, it's almost impossible. I don't want to say impossible, but it's very, very difficult to break into.
Do you think it also is just that there's just not the effort there? You know what I mean? Because some of these consoles like Xbox One, I know you could sort of your own time with your own dev, like with your own kit, you can turn it into a dev kit basically. You get limited access to RAM and stuff, but if you want, you can do it your own, and they're just sort of go ahead and do it. So you think it's a mentality of just you don't want to put the effort in. These people don't want to put the effort in as well.
That's a good point. Like, when the original Xbox came out, everyone wanted Homebrew on it, and then on the 360. Microsoft heard and saw what was going on, so they opened up, the XNA stuff or the 360, and now on the Xbox One, you're right. There's the dev mode, right? You pay, I think it's $20, and you can you don't get all access to the entire system, but you get enough access pretty much to do what you want on there. So I think the Homebrew community has always been about freedom and basically being allowed to do whatever you want. You own the hardware, or you're supposed to own the hardware, but you can't do anything on the hardware. You have this kind of binding end user license agreement that lets you basically play games, and that's it. So, I think the homebrew community has always just wanted, more freedoms. And once those are given to you, then there's really no desire to really, start taking the system apart and trying to figure out a way to get into it. Yeah. And, if you look at like the PlayStation 3, when they had Linux on there and then they took it away, that's when the system got hacked, because people, there was a concerted effort of not just people that wanted to run Linux on there, but there was hackers, and there was also people that, were kind of in both camps. And so many people kind of rallied around the fact that they took this really important feature away. And, what are we going to do about it? We're going to try to bring it back ourselves. And that's what they did in the end,
That was a whole, I remember the way that sort of came out, and then there was all the other stuff going on with Anonymous, and it just turned into such a unnecessarily big issue as well.
Definitely.
How do you see the homebrew scene sort of changed, over the past few years? Like, how has it changed? Do you think the mindset of these companies like Sony, Nintendo have changed?
Well, I guess there's two things I can say there. As far as how homebrew is these days, like I said, I've dabbled in the Nintendo Switch stuff, and it seems very familiar to me. Like, nothing really has changed as far as the way things are done, in the homebrew circles. But as far as the companies, they're starting to embrace, that concept of, let's bring these old games back and run them under emulation, So you see like Digital Eclipse do collections. You see M2, Nintendo have their own collections of, Super Nintendo games and NES games on there. Yeah, you got the remix stuff. So finally, these companies are starting to embrace, running emulation and bringing these games back. So it's definitely not something that occurred overnight, but I think, they're starting to see the value of, these old classic games, and there's definitely still a market for those games,
Yeah. Do you think we'll see a sort of drop in the efforts as well of homebrew if you start seeing more digital games from Nintendo and from Xbox, and, the old school stuff coming back?
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think there'll always be a homebrew alternative to everything. Like some recent examples I can think of was on the Switch, we've seen official releases of Doom 3. Yeah. And we've seen like official releases of Doom 64. And both of those exist in a homebrew capacity as well. And, I don't want to say they're as good, but they're pretty close, they look and they run just as well, but they are missing some features, of course, notably around the networking stuff. But I guess there'll always be, a homebrew alternative, where applicable, to some of these projects,
Yeah. And then I saw Nintendo was censoring your videos last year, specifically around the homebrew stuff that you were talking about. Is it? I know you mentioned that they've got sort of good intention with bringing things back, but there's still that sort of homebrew isn't seen as or legal, or it's not seen as something that's ethical with these companies.
Yeah, everything that went down with Nintendo last year was interesting. After the fact, I got some really good information, and ultimately their biggest issue, and if I had known this going in, I probably would have done things a little different, was that they took issue with their first party games being shown on a video that was running on a hacked Switch.
Yep.
That's where they took offense to it. So if I was running third-party games if I basically just swapped out everything with third-party games, they wouldn't have cared. Yep. So they didn't like that, I was running Super Mario 64 under N64 emulation on a Switch. A lot of people were thinking that, well, maybe they're about to bring, N64 games to the Switch. But I mean, dude, it's been 2 years. I'm still waiting for it,
I want that too. Yeah,
right. But look, I was at the time when that all went down, I was pretty annoyed. I felt like, my it was a fair use issue, and I was within my rights to do so. But the more I kind of sat down and thought about it, I mean, at the end of the day, Nintendo cares about their brand, and they'll do pretty much anything they can to protect their brand. So I didn't feel like I was like, initially I felt like it was a personal target towards me, but as I kind of dabbled, dug into it more, and I saw it happening to others as well, I quickly realized that, this is a business thing. This has nothing to do with, with me or anything like that. So I've been very, very careful, since then. And I mean, the other thing is, I work in game dev now, and I work with real Nintendo development hardware. So I'm a registered Nintendo developer. So, those things also come into play as well about what I show on my videos these days,
Yeah. So they were even annoyed with like older like games. You're running first party games from like the SNES.
Yep. Yeah. Wow. It didn't matter. Like, and that's the thing, if you're going to, and I tell this to anyone, if you want to do YouTube content on Homebrew stuff or hacks systems, Nintendo systems, keep the first party stuff out of there, because it really will make you walk away without any issue. Otherwise, they may come after you.
Well, that's the thing. Where's the line there? That the legal line where what you can show, you can't show, and you can show running backups of games, and who knows, like.
Yeah. The problem is YouTube is an interesting platform because they don't actually get involved in fair use disputes. Yeah. So when this all went down, I filed an appeal, which got rejected. But the way it works is Nintendo doesn't actually adjudicate on this at all. It's between you and the other party, right? So unless you get a lawyer and fight it in court, the chances of you actually winning are pretty low. Yeah. So it's a lot of people that do YouTube aren't happy about that process because it feels like people can take advantage of you, and in some ways it's actually true. Yeah. But hopefully one day they'll change it around so it's more in favor of the creator, because a lot of the times it does feel like we're being unfairly treated and unfairly targeted when things like that happen.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It seems like a bit tipped in their favor. It's whatever they rule is whatever they rule, as opposed to, let's discuss it or find out what's actually happening here. It's just someone claims something and then that's about it. It's in their hands. Yeah,
absolutely.
More towards your own personal career. How did you sort of find moving from Australia to the US?
Not as bad as you would think, actually. So I moved over here because I met a woman who is now my wife of many, many years. I mean, coming from a big city living in Melbourne, being raised in Melbourne, Australia, moving over here, there's some things that are different in the US. But the way business is done here, the way work, is very, very similar, something I'm very kind of familiar with. And, there are definitely things that took some adjustment, especially, food and things like that. But getting kind of assimilated into living here hasn't really been that bad. It's been a long time since I moved over here. It was 2006, but a lot of the things were very familiar to me, and I think that really helped. I never got that feeling where I felt like I had, what's the word, where you just wake up one day and you freak out, like you don't know where you are, type of thing. I never got that feeling where I just felt like, I didn't belong or anything like that. It was just something that kind of happened kind of naturally. And like I said, with the way that work is here where you work, most places you work, if you've lived and worked in Australia, it's very, very, very familiar. Yeah, yeah.
So it's a very similar sort of environment and culture and that sort of stuff as well.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Do you come visit back to Australia every now and then?
Yeah, every year actually, except this year, obviously I'm kind of waiting for restrictions to lift, and but I usually travel to Melbourne once a year and visit the folks, and last time we were there, we did New Zealand as well for a few days, and
awesome.
But yeah, I love going back to Australia. It's it's home, So
it's good to hear that you haven't lost the Aussie accent.
No, some people say that I've like got a little twinge of a US accent at the end of it, but I don't think I ever lost it.
No, I can't hear it. I think it's still all Aussie.
That's good.
Yeah. In terms of Night Dive Studios, how long have you been there now?
So that started about 3 months ago now, and it's been about 3 months. I'm very much new to the company, but unfortunately I can't talk about the projects that we're working on, but just take a look at what they've got planned, and you can kind of get a sense of what we do there. But it's a good place to work, and still very new and learning about the way that development is done in a team, because I mean this is really my first ever kind of game dev job, in a traditional sense, where you're working with a team of professionals that have done game dev for many years. So I will say that when I first started there, it was a little intimidating, not because of my skill set. I mean, I'm pretty confident, and I know how to write code pretty well. I've done it for many years, but just, doing stuff solo as a homebrew dev versus being in a team where there's a little more structure around, things. Certainly, there's definitely a learning curve there, but it's been awesome, man. The team has been fantastic, more than welcoming. They're all fans of my channel as well, which makes it good. So, but it's an awesome place to work, and honestly, if you asked me before I started working there, what studio would you like to work for, they would have been one of the top ones on the list, because I'm one of those people. I mean, as you know, I love retro stuff, right? It doesn't matter if it's emulation or ports or whatever. And Night Dive, obviously, they basically bring back old franchises and make them more modern again and give them a fresh coat of paint. So that's definitely something that really appeals to me. Yeah,
and that's at the core of Night Dive. I mean, they pick up old licenses, old games, and they'll bring them and port them to a new console and that sort of stuff. So I feel like that's the fact that your live stream porting games, it's right within your wheelhouse as well.
Absolutely.
And did they do Doom? You guys did Doom 64 as well?
Yes, that was earlier this year when Doom Eternal came out back in March. I want to say they also kind of shadow dropped Doom 64 for all systems, I think it was. Yeah,
I played it on Switch. It's like, it's amazing. It's really good. It's runs really smooth.
Yeah, that's the great part about working for Night Dive, is everyone there is really passionate about games. I'm not saying other studios aren't, but we basically put so much care and attention into, if we're gonna bring a game back from the depths of from many years ago, we're going to enhance it, and make it the best possible experience that you can, but without losing anything that made it so awesome in the beginning. Yeah. So we don't necessarily want to change the engine or something and use like Unreal or something, but we definitely want to bring it to a more modern audience and with modern features. And Night Dive is really awesome at doing that. And done some really awesome work in the past.
Because I noticed they've got their own engine as well that they've maybe developed in-house as well, which just. Yep. Is it that things get ported to that, or is it, how does it work with that?
So the engine's called Kex, and the Kex engine was used when they got the license for Turok. So they released, if you recall, they did Turok 1 and 2 on the Switch.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
So they basically before that they had, I don't want to call them engines, but they had, I'll say, a library of APIs that they use. But the Kex engine is essentially the engine that's used to basically modernize these old IPs. So it's all C++ code, but it really just encapsulates all the things that you want to bring across to a more modern architecture.
And is it really like flexible in terms of it's portable, you can put it on Switch, you tie it with the Switch APIs to Xbox to everything else.
Yeah, it's very, very portable. It's got all the hooks into all the current generation systems and the next generation systems as well. So Doom 64, I wasn't there when that released, but I think I'm right in saying that it came out on the same day for Switch, PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Yeah, and that's to the power of the Kex Engine. It's very, very very portable across all those environments.
Is that available to companies who want to use it, or is it just an in-house thing?
It's all internal at the moment. Okay. I don't know if that's something that would be considered to to license out, but at the moment it's all internal stuff.
Yeah, and I noticed even Night Dive did I know they do a lot of adventure games from the 90s, even do putt-putt, which who would have thought that would be brought forward and ported into the modern world as well.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen Kick, the CEO, he's a real passionate PC gamer, and anything that could be brought back and sold on GOG or Steam, if there's an avenue to do so, he'll probably go ahead and do it. So nothing surprises me with Dive, honestly.
I wonder if we'll see a drop in the the pricing of a lot of those old school 90s boxed games, which they've gone to insane prices, I've heard.
Well, yeah, I mean, they just released the System Shock, the not the remake, that's still coming out, but they released the update to System Shock, and that's a box copy that I bought from Limited Run Games, but the original System Shock still costs a fortune, so I don't know if that holds true. I wish it did, but I think people, collectors still want the original stuff.
They want the original stuff. Yeah. How have you found it sort of working on? Well, you going from working on original Xbox, you got extremely limited hardware. You got I think it was 64 meg RAM. Yeah, I don't know what was the CPU like.
730 megahertz.
Yeah, 730 megahertz. Pentium 3. Yeah. How do you find that sort of now you're working on, or it must seem like almost limitless hardware? When you're porting games over to this stuff.
I still have that mindset that I want things to be as optimized as possible. You know what I mean? So, I mean, yeah, it's so much nicer these days having access to a lot more hardware, a lot more RAM. But I'm always, because I come from that background, I always think about, the next line of code that I write, is that the best way I can do it? Is it going to trash performance? It's going to, is it going to get in the cache, or is it going to not get in the cache? All that kind of stuff. So, I still have that mentality, but it is nice to have, obviously a lot more resources at your disposal,
I feel like we should be giving all game devs, original Xboxes to code on, so it makes them a bit more efficient.
I mean, it's funny you say that, because I guess on the flip side of my experience is I don't know anything about Unity and Unreal, right? I mean, I know a little bit about those engines, right? Yeah. But so if you said, okay, whip up a 3D scene in Unity, I'd spend a whole week trying to figure it out. Yeah. But I could code it in OpenGL or in Vulkan or in DirectX probably in a couple of days, and have it all running. Yeah. So I don't know, if I'm a relic of the old school, but I do know that, having programming skills is still very important these days in game development, especially when it comes to optimizing and understanding, how things are done under the covers, Well,
I was just gonna ask if you had dabbled in Unreal or Unity at all.
Done a little bit, but it's not really why I was hired. You know what I mean? There are far more experienced people that do that stuff, and much better people. I mean,
it's from the sort of 90s and early 2000s era where it was you had to, it was very difficult to license out an engine. It was almost like you had to build it in house.
Yep.
And then you went from there. So I think, you're right. It probably does make you code and think more efficiently with the limited resources that you have, whereas you've got Unity and Unreal devs now, and they don't worry about any of that stuff. They just throw everything in the scene, and then they get it working, and then they'll try optimize and cut back from there once they figure out that they've hit this sort of bottleneck. So
until you get to porting,
until you get porting.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying that my way is right and their way is wrong, or their way is right and mine's wrong. It's just a different way things are done.
For sure.
It's just a much different process that I mean, it works for AAA and most game developers will use those tools, and why not? I mean, in some ways, taking the, I guess, the code or the coder out of the equation really kind of helps you, get things moving along versus literally spending months building an engine that may hopefully, is what you expected it to be,
Yeah. And how have you found it? I mean, given that Unity and Unreal, they've got these sort of, I mean, they're built for collaborative work. How have you found it sort of working in that almost older, way of working or different way of working now that you're sort of having to collaborate with a lot of other people at Night Dive?
The team has been awesome to work with. Most of them have similar experience to me as far as what their skills are. Some of them are more proficient with like 3D APIs than what I would be. But there's others that like we have a networking guy that's what he does. I mean, he adds networking support to all the titles that we work on. But we all work very well together. It's basically everyone's virtual, so there's no office. It's a virtual company, and we have employees that work around the world. So we basically just we collaborate through through Zoom, through Discord, through Skype, and Teams and things like that. We have, but it's it feels like just a regular software dev team that I've worked in, with just regular jobs in the past. So, everyone has their own tasks to do, and it works well. It's a good chemistry there.
Yeah, awesome. What, in terms of your YouTube channel, are you facing any challenges now with it, or what's next for the future? What sort of videos can we expect to see?
Challenges, not really. I mean, YouTube, the landscape always is changing. If you're a content creator, you probably have experienced some of those changes, but none of them really affect me in any way. As far as what's coming, I don't really know. Like, a lot of people think that I've got some. Yeah, how do you
plan your videos?
Master plan or something, but I really don't, man. Like, I mean, that's not entirely true. I do have a couple of ideas that I kind of throw around in my head about the next video, and in some cases I've already like half done written videos that I complete, but I don't have this like roadmap of what is coming over the next like 3 or 4 months or 6 months. Whatever feels right at the time, I'll do. And I think that's part of what keeps the channel so interesting. Like I'm not just getting into a routine where I'm doing like a review of something, or I'm doing a let's play of a video game or something. Like I'm always thinking about something interesting to bring to the audience. So with that, man, I literally don't have a video for this week lined up yet. Like I just finished the last one. So, but usually I do have a schedule that I work through. So it's Monday night over here in the US right now. So the video that I just released just dropped earlier today, last night for Australia. But I usually take this, like tonight's my night off. I don't even think about YouTube, right? And then by like Wednesday, I'm writing a script for the next video, and then Thursday I'm filming the B-roll, and then Friday I'm working on the audio. So, I've got like a set schedule that I stick to every week, and it seems to work. So
really the process is, you'll be messing around with a certain thing, or you'll be looking at a certain topic, and it would just be whatever really is piqued your interest for the week.
Yeah, and the one that I just released yesterday that was something that I started a couple of weeks ago, but the Nintendo leaks came in, and that was something that I felt like I had to cover. So in some instances, I'll put something to the side and bring something in that's kind of more relevant, because there's some stories that need to be covered pretty quickly, and that was definitely one of them.
What have you found are the videos that people engage with or love the most?
I think the ones that people like the most are the hacking ones. The one that has the most views is the Nintendo Wii was hacked with a pair of tweezers video. That's got like 2.5 million views on the it's my most watched video. Yeah. And so those stories of how things were hacked, like the companies like Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, the amount of security that they put into their old consoles only for them to be completely obliterated. Yeah. I think a lot of people really are interested in those stories. Yeah, it's like you're watching a narrative or something. You know what I mean? Because it's right. They prepare so much, and then it's just someone found this exploit doing this, and it just opens a whole door to some other stuff. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Do you get time to play many games nowadays? Or occasionally. I'm a gamer, and I've always have been, but time is very valuable these days between the different things I do. But I still play the occasional game. Like I just finished Ghost of Tsushima on the PS4. Awesome. Played a lot. I mean, most of the AAA games I'll at least start. Hopefully I'll get around to finishing. But I don't really play games as anywhere near as much as I used to, unfortunately. What
sort of games are you playing now? I know you mentioned Last of Us and the other one as well.
Yeah, I played those two on the Switch. I started playing Paper Mario, which it's not my favorite game, but it's pretty cool. But other than that, I like the retro stuff. I usually go back to emulation, and I'll fire up MAME or Super Nintendo or PlayStation 1. I like the classics, and I always have, and that's kind of the bread and butter stuff that I like.
What is the older generation console that you keep frequenting or going back to play old school games?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I kind of go through phases with stuff. Like,
what's the phase now?
It's Dreamcast now, believe it or not. Yeah. So I've got that Retro Fighters stick, which is just looks like a regular, Pro controller. I've been kind of going through the Dreamcast catalog again and enjoying that. So that's been awesome. I really like the Dreamcast. I've got a soft spot for it. I love that system so much. But I mean, that'll probably change, in a couple of weeks. It'll probably be PS2 or GameCube or something else.
Have you done any development on the Dreamcast before?
I actually have not. Dreamcast it came out just a little bit before the original Xbox. I followed the scene very closely, and I've had some thoughts about doing stuff with it. Like recently, like I said, Super Mario 64, and I was thinking about maybe porting Diablo to it and dabbling with it, but I kind of want to get my hands on a Katana development kit, and the price of those things are ridiculous. So if any of your listeners is selling one, let me know. But no, I definitely would like to mess around with the Dreamcast. I think it's a really interesting piece of hardware for sure.
Yeah, and I know that they had Windows CE libraries on there that you could utilize to build games on.
Yep.
And you had the BBA as well. You can do it through that. I'm pretty sure you can sort of develop through the BBA.
Yeah, I've got a BBA. Look, there's really no reason why I don't do it. I could probably set up a homebrew dev kit with a retail Dreamcast and a BBA. I just don't have the time, honestly. Maybe one day I'll get something out on there. But everyone that does Dreamcast projects, I'm like really, really, in awe of, because it's such a cool system, and they keep releasing games for it, which is awesome.
That's what I was going to say. It's got, I always see Kickstarters which result in Dreamcast games. Like they're still pumping them out, and people are still paying for them, which is just insane to think of. So many years later. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, that's everything I have to ask about. Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. Amazing. I'm loving the beard now.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the COVID beard.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for coming on. Yeah, awesome. We'll keep watching. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Twitter at modernvintageg. My DMs are open, so feel free to DM me. I do sometimes get busy and I don't respond to everyone, but I usually try. I read everything. I'll usually try to get back to you if I haven't. Otherwise, YouTube, Modern Vintage Gamer, you'll find me there. Instagram, Facebook, just search for me. You'll find me there as well.
Awesome. So if you need any old games ported, reach out to Modern Vintage Gamer.
No port requests.
No port requests. Put it in brackets, port request. Awesome. Thank you for that.
Thanks for tuning in.